Today's scripture reading is from Joshua chapter 1 and chapter 5, various verses. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua 5. When Joshua was by Jericho, he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing before him with his drawn sword in his hand. And Joshua went to him and said to him, Are you for us or for our adversaries? And he said, No, but I am the commander of the army of the Lord. Now I have come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and worshipped and said to him, What does my Lord say to his servant? And the commander of the Lord's army said to Joshua, Take off your sandals from your feet, for the place where you are standing is holy. And Joshua did so. This is the word of the Lord.
What is moral courage? First, I'd like to begin with a qualifier. That is, courage is different from daring. I remember one time when I attended a funeral of this young man. There he was a sick young man who had died, and there was his casket. And the family was heartbroken because he was a young man, only in his 20s. And he died because he was executed by the Singapore government. He was hung, and that's why he was dead. And why was he hung? For drug trafficking. He wasn't even a drug addict himself. He wasn't a regular drug trafficker. But somebody dared him and said, Why don't you, do you have the courage? Do you dare to bring drugs into Singapore or not? And he decided to take up the dare. And he was caught. And he was executed. That is not courage. That is foolhardiness. It was daring, for sure. But it wasn't a dare that paid dividends. It was a very sad situation that I witnessed. So never take up a dare, because it is plain stupid. It has nothing to do with courage. Now, the world has a view of courage. And what is the world's view of courage? The world's view of courage is this. Moral courage is the act of standing up for your convictions at personal cost. So now that is quite a good definition, and moral courage is therefore quite good. But the problem is that there is no evaluation of the quality of those convictions. What if your convictions are not the right convictions? Then what happens? Okay. The Christian conviction is a little bit different. It says its moral courage is the act of standing up for the right convictions at personal cost. So it is almost the same. The only difference is whether it is right convictions or your personal convictions. Okay? So those personal convictions that we have must be right ones. Let us look at some examples from the past, so that with distance, perhaps we won't feel so sensitive. The Second World War was started because of the Nazis in Germany. And they were convinced about something, that their mission was right. They were convinced that they were the chosen people to bring about a better world. And to bring about a better world involved killing of inferior races. like the Jews, like the Romas or Gypsies, like the Slavs. Slavs would be like the Ukrainians and all these people. They are the Slavic people. So they believe, the Nazis believe that they are the super race, and that they should become what in German they call Übermensch, a Superman, borrowing the word from Friedrich Nietzsche. Okay, now, then I would like to also point out an example that's more current, a conviction that does not bring about good morality. The Palestinians are convinced that the Jews have no right to live. They say that Palestine is from the river to the sea, meaning the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, leaving no place for the Jews. So if you look at Arab countries today, they all have zero Jews, okay? Because every Arab country kills off or drives out every single Jew in their country. And they believe in genocide, that they want to kill off every single Jew. That is their conviction. But does that mean it is the right conviction? An example of good conviction is found in the person Moses. You see, Moses was identified with the Egyptian nobility, right? He was adopted by the princess, and therefore he had a luxurious life. However, it was no secret that he was actually a Hebrew child, and that he was growing up in the palace. He was probably the playmate with with the princess in Egypt. Okay? He had two choices in life. One choice is to live within the luxury of Egypt. Another choice is to stand up for his people. And we are told that one of those days he was walking around and he saw this Egyptian slave master beating up a fellow Hebrew to the point of death. And so he intervened. And by intervening, he killed the Egyptian slave driver. And therefore, he became a wanted person. And he had to flee for his life. Hebrews 11:24 says this, by faith, Moses, when he was grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to be mistreated with the people of God than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. So here he made a choice. It was a conviction, a choice that he made. It comes at personal cost, but it was a good direction. Okay, so not all convictions are right, and so some convictions are not so right. Now, having observed that not all convictions are morally right, we come to the story of Joshua, who was asked to be strong and courageous. And how did he handle that? So our main subject today would be, how do I grow my moral courage as a Christian? Okay, well, there are only 2 points in this sermon. The first is that you grow your moral courage by having the right conviction, and then you grow your moral courage by doing the right conviction. So how do we have the right moral convictions, and how do we do the right moral convictions? The first point is this: you grow your moral courage through having the right moral convictions. Now, in the passage that we just read, you will notice something. You may have already noticed that Joshua was told several times to be courageous, right? In verse 6, be strong and courageous. In verse 7, only be strong and very courageous. And in verse 9, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not be frightened and do not be dismayed. So the question is this: how many times did God tell him, be courageous? You can count, right? 3 times. Okay, very simple, right? 3 times. In one short passage, God told him 3 times to be courageous. But there is also a theme that is all repeated in this passage. And that is the question, how many times did God ask Joshua to obey his commands? Okay. So here you find Joshua also asked this, also told this. He was told that he should be very careful to do according to all that the law that Moses, my servant, commanded you. So that's 1 count, right? And then later on in verse 8, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night. So that's the 2nd count. And then be careful to do according to all that is written in it. So altogether, how many times? 3 times. Okay, so 3 times be strong and courageous, 3 times obey the Lord. Okay, so it's quite simple. So the main point then is this: your strength and moral courage comes with obeying God. You see, you grow your Christian moral courage when you fight God's cause, not necessarily your own cause. And you take courage when your enemies are actually God's enemies. If we are fighting for our own selfish interests, then it is not necessarily a fight for our moral courage. Now, in Joshua chapter 5, we are told of this rather interesting story. We are told that Joshua was by Jericho, meaning he was about to attack the city of Jericho. And he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, a man was standing before him with his sword drawn in his hand. So by Jericho means that he had gone into the promised land, they had crossed the river Jordan, and so in front of them was this city that stood in their way, called Jericho. Behind them was the river Jordan. So they have an enemy in front and a river behind. Sort of no retreat, okay? So he was in this rather scary situation where it would have been easy to become nervous. And then we saw a person with a drawn sword, apparently ready to fight. You know, if the sword is inside the scabbard, it means that you are not about to engage anyone, right? But if the sword is drawn and it's a naked sword, then it means that the person is about ready to fight. That is basically what the image was. But apparently, this person wasn't aggressive. If it was aggressive, Joshua would have started fighting him, right? But this person was just standing there with a drawn sword. And so Joshua did the correct thing. It is what we call IFF in today's term, identification friend or foe. Okay, every time there's a radar and the airplane is flying over, the radar would send a signal to the plane, and the plane, if it is a friend, will send a friendly signal. Okay, so there's a IFF, identification friend or foe. In today's world, we have this method, where we challenge a person with a question. We will say something like, Mickey Mouse, okay, or the not so simple, Mickey and Mouse, everybody knows how to answer that. But let's say I say Mickey Mouse, okay, then you are supposed to reply something, okay. Maybe it might be Donald Duck, it might be Minnie Mouse, it might be Pluto or whatever, okay. So that is to identify whether this person is a friend or foe. Well, last time they didn't have that. So we simply ask, are you friend or foe? Of course, the foe will still say I'm a friend, right? But so interestingly, Joshua asked this question, are you for us or against us? And the answer was no. Excuse me, that's not a yes, no answer. Okay. Sometimes people ask you a question and say the answer is yes. But it's not a yes, no answer. Why was the answer no? Well, because it was a wrong question. Okay, that was why the answer was no. Modern translation, some translations say neither. Well, neither is good, it's a good translation, but actually in Hebrew it's just no. Okay, no. So are you for us or are you against us? For our enemies? Well, the answer was a simple no. Instead, the person said, I'm the commander of the army of Yahweh, of the Lord. So this person is ready to fight. And he says, I am your commander. Okay, that's what he's saying. Because you are fighting God's army, you are God's army, but this person says, I'm the real commander of the army. In other words, he is saying that I am God himself. Joshua, for whatever reason, recognized it. Now, this person just appeared as a human being. He wasn't glowy or shiny or anything like that. Appeared as a human. But somehow Joshua understood who that was, and we are told that he fell on his face. Meaning, not meaning that he tripped and fell down, but that, he fell on his face, meaning that he knelt down and with his face to the ground. Okay? And that, of course, is a picture of total submission. A person can kneel and can do a high kneel. It can still see the person's face, right? But if you are kneeling with the face on the ground, means you are totally exposed, okay? That person can kill you, can do whatever he wants. You are not able to respond because you're not looking at the person. So he understood who this person was, and he knelt with his face to the ground. And then we are told that he worshipped. And meaning that he knew this was not a human being, that this was God himself. And that was why he worshipped. And then the person went on to tell him, take off your sandals because you are on holy ground. The presence of God makes the place holy. Now, does this event remind you of anything at all? Some other incident in the Bible? What event was that? Very good. You know the Bible very well. Moses, right? God appeared to Moses in the burning bush, and then God told him, "Take off your shoes, for you are on holy ground. Take off your sandals, for you are on holy ground." So, in a certain sense, this is a repeat. So, Joshua crossed the river Jordan in the same way that Moses brought them across the Red Sea. Now that he's across the Jordan, God appeared to him, saying that, take off your sandals because you're on holy ground, in the same way that he had affirmed Moses that he was on holy ground. Now, who was this person? We are told he's the commander of the Lord of hosts. This is something that we call a Christophany. We learned a new word today. Okay, this is a theological word. And most scholars agree that this is a Christophany, meaning Christ, from the word Christ there, right? Phany means appearance. That means Christ appearing as a human being in the Old Testament times. Okay? In the same way that there are instances when God appeared like a human being, and so we call it theophany, meaning God appearing as a human being. Now, in the Old Testament, you'll read of several instances of the angel or the messenger of the Lord. And then, as the story goes on, many times the people would bow down and worship this angel of the Lord. And this angel will accept worship. And in other instances, when it is an angel of the Lord, then the angel will reject worship and say, "Don't worship me, I'm not God." So this term angel of the Lord is quite an interesting term. And this term disappears in the New Testament. It was never found again in the New Testament. And most scholars believe that this is Jesus Christ, the pre-incarnate Christ in the Old Testament. Because when you see this angel of the Lord, sometimes he appears as a human being, he receives worship, and he has all the characteristics of God in human flesh. But of course, it is not an incarnation because Christ became a real human being. Those are only appearances of a humanity. Okay, so most people agree that this was a Christophany, Christ appearing in human form. So now, when we ask God the question, "Are you for me or against me?" the answer is always no. Okay? No, because it is the wrong question. Because God is the captain of your life. And when you ask God the question, "God, are you for me or are you against me?" that is the question we need to answer and not God. That means God is the one who is asking, "Are you for me or against me?" And then we have to answer that question. We shouldn't be asking that question. So God will not answer that question if you ask, "God, are you for me or against me?" So then I like to say this, that moral courage does not come when God is on your side. It comes when you are on God's side. And therein lies that big difference. Eventually, hopefully, it is the same side because you are on God's side. But God doesn't come to your side, even though it is the same side, like in the case of Joshua. They were on the same side. But it was still important for Joshua to understand that he was on God's side and God was not on his side. So then, we note our first point, that you grow your moral courage by having the right moral convictions, by adopting the right morality, by following what God says, and by being on his side. And this led to Joshua carrying out God's mission for him. And he grew from strength to strength. And that, of course, leads us then to the next point. That is, you grow your moral courage by doing the right moral convictions. So you do not become strong just by believing. You become strong by doing. People who do bodybuilding and carry weights, it's not enough to say that, "Oh, I learned all about this, how to build strength and resistance and all that," but you never do it. Then you're skinny as I am. So you're not going to put on any muscle if you don't actually do it. So we're going to build our moral courage only by exercising that moral courage. So now, We will not go through the whole of Joshua's life about moral courage. And what we are going to do here is to focus on our situation now, examples of ways in which we can exercise moral courage. Now, another qualifier I want to make is this, okay? Even though I will be listing several for us, it doesn't mean that you have the capacity to engage in all of them. The greater likelihood is that you engage in 1, 2 of them at most, okay? You simply because in life, they say you need to pick your fights, okay? You cannot fight every single battle there is. You cannot fight every worthy cause, okay? So we need to select, okay? The first example I'd like to give is this, that you exercise your moral courage when you fight the culture war of greed. See, we live in a world that is fundamentally greedy. And greedy doesn't mean food, and greedy means money, greedy for money, okay? And that's what people are greedy about. They are greedy for money. They never seem to have enough. They always want to maximize profits. And yet there are some Christians who have made it a point to work differently, to function differently. We have a good example in the restaurant called Chick-fil-A. You know, most restaurants want to maximize their profits, open 7 days a week, if possible, 24 hours a day. Okay? And that way they can maximize their profits. That is their focus. However, Chick-fil-A closes on Sundays. They are run by Christians and they insist on closing on Sundays. Now, their franchise fee is ridiculously low. I think if you want to open up a McDonald's franchise, for example, I think it's something like $1 million. Okay, you have to pay McDonald's $1 million in order to have a license to run a McDonald's. All right. You know how much Chick-fil-A charges for a franchise? 20,000. So there's this huge difference. There's this huge difference. And Chick-fil-A is one of the most profitable franchisees around, more profitable than a McDonald's. And yet they only charge 20,000. Okay? Well, then everybody will be knocking at the doors, right? Okay. Well, there is, so to speak, a catch. Okay. One of the catch is this, that is, you must be committed to the company's principles. And one of it is that you must give people rest 1 day in a week. Okay. That is one of those things. Another one is that they must provide good quality product. It is not about maximizing profit. It's about serving your customer well. They are also only allowed 1 franchise per person, in fact, per family. They want this to be a family engagement. That, like you run a family restaurant, this is how you run it. It's just that we supply you the know-how, that's all. And they treat their staff well. So if you go to a Chick-fil-A, you'll find that the staff also treat you well, okay? Because they are treated well. And they are friendlier, they are warmer, they are very helpful, and at the same time, they do not support the LGBTQ movement. So the LGBTQ decided to boycott them, and they called for a boycott of Chick-fil-A, and they organized this, but it backfired. Because when the word went out that LGBTQ was going to boycott Chick-fil-A, all the supporters supported, Chick-fil-A. Okay. So there are long queues outside Chick-fil-A, buying their burgers. Okay, so in fact, they made more money than ever with the LGBTQ boycott. You see, the idea people have is that business is always about making money. The more money, the better. But so businesses are always about making money. But Chick-fil-A decided it's not just about making money. I want to live my Christian principles while I'm doing this business. Okay. Now, another example of exercising moral courage is this, that you can exercise moral courage when you fight the woke LGBTQ cancel culture. Okay. An example is this person called Jordan Peterson. He was he's a psychologist, and Canada was planning to legislate laws that says that you must call people with certain pronouns, like Z and them and them and whatever it is, whatever pronouns I want you to call me, you must remember and call me by that pronoun. And being a university professor, if he does not comply, he loses his job. He gets fired. Okay, so he objected to that and he fought against that vociferously. And then his name became very well known. So everybody now knows Jordan Peterson. Last time, nobody knows him. Now everybody knows him. So he becomes even more prominent and more significant in this thing. So, but it came at a personal cost because people attack him, they would marginalize him, and every opportunity they would deliberately misrepresent him. Okay, so then he was and still is constantly attacked by people. But he decided to exercise the moral courage to reject this woke cancel culture. And that's what they mean by cancel culture, by the way, if you don't know. It means that they want to cancel you off the existence of this world. Okay, they ostracize you, they delete you, they ignore you, and basically organize a personal boycott against you. That's what this culture does. Okay. Another way to exercise your moral courage and to grow your moral courage is when you fight death and disease. Now, this comes naturally if you're in the medical profession, right? But even when a person is in the medical profession, the reality is that it is very commercialized. And those of you who are in the medical world, the doctors are given production numbers, production figures. That means you must see so many X number of patients. Otherwise, if your production is not there, your salary might drop or something, or you might get fired or whatever. So even in the medical profession that is essentially there to help people fight disease and death, it is commercialized. Okay, and now everybody needs to survive, including doctors. Okay, and it's right that they get paid well because they spend many years of their lives preparing and studying for it. But you must not be measured by your production alone. You must be measured differently. You must be able and willing to take up cases that are not financially rewarding. And this is why there are some doctors who don't want to be part of a bigger practice because you don't have a choice. If somebody comes in and is not able to pay, then they go a certain route. But if you are running your own practice, you can say that I can do this free of charge, or I can do this as a service or something. But when you are in the bigger practice and you're under certain rules, you cannot do that. Okay, so I think it is important that when you are in fighting death and disease, that it is not done as a commercial enterprise, but there is also that moral enterprise involved. Another example is when you exercise moral courage when you fight ignorance. And now this is in the realm of teaching. If you are naturally gifted in teaching and you know what it is, when you are teaching somebody and suddenly the eyes lights up and the face lights up and you feel great satisfaction because the person is an aha moment. And now I understand, right? So it is, you experience great satisfaction in that. So teaching, like the healing profession, is naturally seen as virtuous, but it need not be, because we can actually turn it into something strictly commercial. So for example, if you're a very good teacher, if I'm a very good teacher, I can say that I'm going to call for higher and higher and higher fees, which is fine. Okay, you go and call for high fees that only the rich kids, kids with rich parents can afford. Okay, but if you do that, do you have a provision in your scheme of things of helping those who are underprivileged? Because if you don't have such a scheme, then all you are doing is to help the rich get richer, help the rich get more powerful, and their kids that get more powerful. Then the poor kids have no chance to get ahead in life simply because they're not as well equipped. So yes, you can raise it, but there must always be provision in your life when you fight ignorance. Now, then you exercise moral courage when you fight injustice in society. Now, fighting injustice is something that is difficult. Okay, and unlike doctors and teachers, lawyers are always the butts of all jokes. Okay, they are not seen as people who fight injustice. And yet, lawyers can do a wonderful job. Some lawyers would do pro bono work, free work, to help people who are in legal difficulties. Or sometimes they will work on a contingency basis. You have a case to fight. And because you all don't have the money to fight it, never mind, I will take up your case. I think it's a good case. I'll fight it for you. And then if you get compensated, I get compensated. Okay, so that is also possible. So let me give you an example. One example is the case of Trump University. Trump University was encouraging people to sign up and to even take loans. I was there in person. They talk about how to combine your different credit cards so that you can pay them the fees. Then they take the fees, and then they are supposed to teach you how to be successful in real estate like Donald Trump is successful. Okay, so that is the pitch. So is Donald Trump successful in real estate? Yeah, of course, definitely more successful than anybody in your audience, and says, this money that you put in for tuition will pay you back many, many times over. Sad to say, it was all a lie. Okay, they said we'll show you how to do this, but they did not. So eventually, a lawsuit was taken against Trump University, and of course, at first he refused to pay, but the lawyers fought the case, and eventually Donald Trump paid out. Okay, so everything that was taken was paid back to the people, just less the legal fees, and the lawyer was not greedy. The lawyer took 10%, which is a very reasonable contingency for the fight that they had to put up. Okay. Now, another example of unrighteousness and injustice in the world that lawyers need to fight. And this one, I don't think they have successfully fought it. And that is the case of Twitter, now called X, by Elon Musk. Okay. When Elon Musk took over X or Twitter, he decided to stop paying rent. Okay. And so all the landlords were hurting badly because they have mortgages to pay, these commercial buildings. And here you have this rich man refusing to pay rent. And so, of course, the banks went after the landlord, and the landlords became bankrupt. Okay. So, and this is still current. Okay, it's a very recent thing. So then the question is that the right thing to do? Well, sometimes you're not able to fight a certain client, or a certain tenant, or a certain landlord because they have deeper pockets. They drag out the case for you until you go belly up. And that was what Elon Musk did or is doing. He is refusing to pay rent and dragging cases out so that people go bankrupt. And those companies go bankrupt, they close down, story is over, I don't have to pay anymore. Okay, so that is what they do. All right. So there are lots of cases of injustices in the world. So don't think that lawyers are all bad. Okay, you need lawyers to fight cases to create justice in the world. And so when a Christian exercises his moral courage to take on these big cases, and sometimes it's very scary. I mean, can you imagine if you are a small-time lawyer, with a solo law firm or 3 or 5 people in your law firm, and you want to take on Elon Musk, the 3rd richest man in the whole world? It is really, really difficult. I mean, he's somebody who can just take $44 billion and just buy a Twitter with his personal cash and still have money left over. So it's that kind of wealth that you can never really fight against. And it is really hard to fight against that kind of wealth. And yet it is, if you're in the legal profession, people count on you to be able to take on, adversaries like these. And of course, more common would be divorce settlements. Many times in a divorce, there's a need also to carry out a certain level of justice so that there will not be injustice in this rather sad situation. And you also need people to do that. So if you're in that profession, then you're exercising your moral courage when you do the right things for the right people. Another example is this, that you exercise moral courage when you fight for the care of the world. Now, as a child of God, you are going to inherit the earth, okay, and therefore you are to care for it. But this is a little bit tricky because this has become so politicized that it is almost like there's one group that says don't care about the world, there's another group that says care about the world. Then what do I do as a Christian? And many times if you care about your environment and the world, they tell you if you care about the world, then this is how you do it, A, B, C, D, E. But many of these things that are stated are actually not true. Okay, so therefore, how do you function under these circumstances? I mean, for example, electric vehicles. It's supposed to be one way in which you reduce emissions and carbon and all that. And yes, it's true, the electric vehicle runs along and, it doesn't emit stuff coming out of the vehicle, right? That's absolutely true. But it takes a lot of carbon to produce so much more copper inside, to produce the batteries. And then at the end of that life of the electric vehicle, it has to be disposed of. There is so much toxic stuff inside that electric vehicle. So it is not so simple as what I see, this very thing I do is good, therefore it is good. So, and I'm not saying it is good or no good. I'm not the scientist. I cannot tell you the equations. I cannot assert that, oh yeah, EVs are actually good or EVs are actually no good. It's not me. It's not in my place to do so. Okay. But I'm suggesting this, that there is a way in which Christians can function and act morally in the care of the whole world. And that is to live simply. If you live a simple life, you will automatically care more for the world. Okay, you live a smaller footprint. Okay? So for example, you live in a small house versus a big house. Again, not criticizing people who live in big houses. Praise the Lord for wealthy people and all that. But if you live in a big house, do you know that the production of concrete produces a lot of carbon too? Just the concrete that is used to build a house is much more, the big house is much more than the small house. Okay, or if you were to, drive a vehicle with a much bigger capacity, then you automatically use a lot more carbon in the process. So generally, if you will choose to live your life simply, and you are going to determine your own definition of simplicity. Okay, I'm not going to, pontificate and tell you this is how a simple life is like. It is going to be different for everyone. But you need to use your own personal wisdom to talk about what you want to do to simplify in your life, just across the board. Even something as simple as jewelry. Okay, you say, oh, I just gold. Wow, gold is forever, and all these things is a good thing. And again, I'm not saying that gold is no good. But what do they do to extract gold? One of the things that they use to extract gold is what? A poison called cyanide. Okay, cyanide is used to extract gold, and cyanide is so toxic. It kills a person just, in these war movies, they take a pill and then they die straight away. That's cyanide. Okay, so it just in everything, you don't have to think too hard. We don't have to, understand how the whole world operates in order to take care of the earth as Christians. If we live simply, we are already doing it. Okay, and this is as simple as that. That lesson really hit home to me, when I lived in the States, and I like gardening, and so I like to collect the organic waste, eggshells and odds and ends of the vegetables and all that, and just compost it, right? So I patted myself on the back. I'm doing a very good job, keeping the earth green, planting things without using artificial fertilizers. Then I did an audit, a carbon audit, online. They say, what car do you drive? How far do you drive? Blah, blah, blah. It turns out that I'm very dirty. I'm not very clean after all. Sometimes we kind of congratulate ourselves because I don't use plastic bags, I don't use plastic cups, or I don't use plastic plates, and therefore we think we're wonderful, virtuous people. But the more important thing is just simplify your life. When you simplify your life, you will consume less. And when you consume less, ultimately you are engaging in the care of the world. And the 8th point, which will be our last here, is that you exercise moral courage when you engage in evangelism. You see, it takes a lot of courage to tell people about Jesus. And actually, I don't know why. I mean, I find that I need to, level up my courage in order to maybe talk to strangers about Christ. One of our sisters here recently, the mother passed away. I think you all know who I'm talking about. And her mother is fantastic. She would go to church early by going to the MRT station and looking to see who she can talk to. This 80-year-old lady will be going around telling people about Jesus, okay, and inviting people to church. And she has fantastic courage. She's not afraid of rejection. She's not afraid of what people are going to think of her. This lady is weird, or something like that. She doesn't care what people think of her. And she's not afraid to face rejection. And for some of us, we are afraid to tell our loved ones because we are afraid to spoil a relationship in the case of rejection. Some people, on the other hand, when they engage in evangelism, they face persecution. And that is why moral courage is involved. You all know about the case of Pastor Raymond Cole. he was abducted, he is still missing, and he paid for his moral courage with persecution and with his abduction. Okay. In some ways, this is the hardest of all the examples of moral courage, because when you fight all the other things, they are ultimately peripheral in the kingdom of the devil. Okay. But when you do evangelism, this is front and center and core in the kingdom of the devil. And this is where you are going to meet the most resistance. Okay. So I've just given you a sampling today of examples, and there are many expressions of moral courage. So I'd just like to end with two that are close to my heart. Okay, just to conclude with two. The first is this: you exercise moral courage when you do right parenting. And I bring this up because it involves so many people, and sometimes it's so sad to see. So parents are so desperate for their children to love them that they dare not do the things that parents ought to do in parenting. Some parents will say things like, "Oh, my son, my daughter, I treat her like a friend." Sorry, your child is your child. Your child needs a parent. Your child doesn't need a friend. Okay. Your child has lots of friends, but your child has only one parent and you are the one. Okay. So parenting is different from being a friend. Yeah, of course, as a child grows older, the relationship does change. But you must understand that parenting is parenting. Okay, and you must not sidestep the duty as parenting, and just because you are afraid that your child might not like you anymore if you to do certain things that are firm in their lives. So no, you are not the friend, you are the parent. Okay? Another example of moral courage is this: when you exercise moral courage when you admit you're wrong. Okay? Some people, when they are wrong, they just refuse to admit. Okay, and they keep giving excuses. And sometimes it's very tiresome. The person is obviously wrong, and not only do you put up with the wrong, you have to put up with listening to all those excuses. And so say, look, I know you are wrong. Don't pretend. Don't give excuses. Okay, just admit that you're wrong. That's it. Another example of moral courage admitting you're wrong is the counter attack, which is even worse. Yeah, but what about you? Okay, I did wrong, but what about you? You also did this, you also did that. Okay, that's not admitting wrong. Okay, that is a lack of moral courage. So I think it is important that we exercise moral courage in our Christian lives. So then we want to come back to the Word of God to say, number one, moral courage involves having the right convictions and then willing to pay the price for it. At the very least, if nothing else, in the last case, is our pride. Okay, and it's actually a very small price, but it does build up our moral courage when we are willing to admit that we are wrong. Let us pray. Our gracious God, we want to thank you for the direction in your word that calls us to the right kind of conviction. And Lord, grant us the grace to live each day to become more like Jesus. In his name we ask. Amen.
We hope you have been blessed by Pastor Peter's sermon. We'd love to have you visit us at thewell.sg. Have a wonderful week.